Now, the only thing you're missing is that piece of straw.
I live in an urban area. Straw is hard to find.
Good point. But you found a straw hat.
Yes, this is my. I have a bald head, and I don't want to get sunburned at the zoo hat.
But it's also perfect,
Hmm.
Don Lonesome Shanahan,
Right?
for our conversation about a face in the crowd.
Yes, sir.
This is, I think you are the, and this is not to disparage any other guests I've had on the series, but I think you
Mhm.
are the Reelpolitik MVP. Is this the third episode we've done?
Let's see here. We've got All the President's Men, election. This one. Have we done a fourth? I think this might be three in the bit there. Yeah.
I should know this because it's, it's a series that I'm
Your
doing.
show.
Yeah, but
Right.
I'll look it up. I'll correct the record later. But
Yeah.
no, so this is, and as we get closer and closer to the big event next month, the election, this is the penultimate episode. There's only one more to go before
Yeah.
the 2020 election. And, events in recent days have certainly supercharged things. So what better movie to talk about than a film that, I mean, there have been a lot of think pieces and stuff in the last few years about how Elia Kazan's 1957 drama starring Andy Griffith has parallels to Donald Trump. Um,
Yes.
and,
I feel it. Yeah.
I was look, I watched this movie probably 30 years ago with my dad. He showed
Mm.
it to me when I was really young. And I think it's a testament to the film that even though I was like kind of pre-political awareness, I was really into it,
Yeah.
mostly because we grew up watching kind of Andy Griffith, and I was really surprised that Andy Taylor had could have a dark side, but also it's just a powerful piece of filmmaking. And so revisiting it for the second time, to just this afternoon, I was looking for
Yeah.
those Trump parallels, and I definitely saw what people see there, but I noticed a
It's
few
not.
key
Yeah.
differences that I think are kind of important in terms of understanding who this particular character is. And I think it's an important movie to watch during this time, because of everything that it said in 60 years ago about
Right.
politics and entertainment and media, which is a recurring theme in this whole series. So tell me about your experience with A Face in the Crowd. Had you seen it before? Was this your first time?
No, I had seen this. I got talked into it, kind of in a little bit of a film critic challenge. A buddy of mine, shout out to Tim Day at the movies. He's originally from Lubbock, Texas. He now resides in Florida. Him and I became friends on Facebook just because we both cover critics in different circles. And he was doing an alphabet movie club back in 2012. And we were going through the alphabet and picking out kind of obscure movies to see and kind of share within, kind of a group of people who were watch things and review things together. And we got to the letter F, and it was right when Andy Griffith passed away. And I think our original vote for the F movie was something other than Face in the Crowd. I lose it at this point. But this was one of the five not like polled finalists for the F movie in this Alphabet Movie Club we did. And so I saw it for the first time 8 years ago in 2012. Years before Trump and all that.
Another
And
election year, though.
another election years, right?
Yeah.
And it blew me away because same as everybody else, I had I had known Andy Griffith from TV and aw shucksiness and not this, And I of course I didn't know then how much any kind of parallels would be more to a certain person, but the vibes of that it gives off with the media and kind of that homegrown sensation and the rise of popular figures, I felt was, man, ahead of its time and not even, I don't want to say on the nose. It was just as flat out knockout, and I loved it. I loved it then. I got to rewatch it here recently, yesterday, just to get ready for this show, and it just not because of Trump, but just because of how much more we've seen in the last 8 years since I saw it last. It's just grown for me. I agree with those folks that call it one of the best films of the 1950s. It's one of the more powerful original pieces I've seen from that era, and to think it's like you said, to think it's 63 years old and truth telling the way that it does to us now, whew, amazing.
It is one of those odd bits of media that, much
Mm,
like 1984, which people seem to come back to, the book and the movie adaptation, but they keep bringing it up. Typically, it travels with election cycles,
yeah.
but that was written forever ago, and that was a warning. But people, there's almost like this cognitive dissonance, like, oh, that's a
Oh
really
gosh, yes.
great piece of entertainment and it's a wonderful, thrilling warning about society and where it can go, but we're already halfway over the cliff and we've been moving steadily there since these things came out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
And that's this
amazing to.
that's this one too, like television was in its I don't want to say infancy of power, but pretty close back in 1957. And of course the history there is we're coming out of McCarthyism, at that time, and the history behind the writer and the filmmaker of that movie really bear that out, where this is, a bit of a thumb in the nose back to Hollywood, like, okay, fine, you think all of us liberal agenda can do something, watch a conservative nutcase rise to power and see how you feel about things, and who's the real evil one here, somebody like you or somebody like, for Kazan, somebody like me who just feels a little more liberal, not a communist or on that level, but all that. And yeah, but no, I don't see Trump parallels as much as I see the spin of television, and to see that in 1957, and then you maybe, if you wait, 18 more years and you visit it again in network, and then you wait another couple of years and you see it again in broadcast news, and or even something as cheesy and light like 2011, like Morning Glory. Like, we've evolved with our television hit pieces, but this one to me is the best one of all. I dig this movie a ton.
Yeah, and there's a couple others that I think are big in there, like the movie Dave, with Kevin Kline playing the kind of the stand-in for the president. There's a lot of media talk there. Bob Roberts, I don't know if we've seen that one.
I have, it's years. It's been a long time.
And that tracks very closely with this, where you've got he's a folksy guy, he's a musician, sings and crafts a lot of songs to kind of get people on his side, while also pushing a sinister kind of power grabbing agenda. The weird thing about the Lonesome Rhodes character, who, let's just kind of back up and set this up. A Face in the Crowd is the name of a radio station, a radio program in the 50s in Arkansas. And Patricia Neal plays Marcia, who is the producer of this show, and she kind of travels around and just talks to people and gets them to tell their stories or sing songs. It's kind of like an America's Got Talent on the radio.
Yeah.
And one day she's visiting a jail, and she comes across, the sheriff says, "Hey, that drunk guy over there in the corner, he has a guitar. Maybe wake him up and he can sing something." And it turns out to be Lonesome Rhodes. Actually, it's Larry Rhodes, and she names him Lonesome because it's a great kind of a stage name. And he sings a song that's kind of becomes a hit. The station offers him the 7 to 8 a.m. spot to come in and do stuff every day. And pretty soon he's catching on. He's capturing the popular imagination, local and then state and then national. And he ends up getting a TV show. Weird trajectory. This is where it kind of gets into fantasy and almost becomes comedic. He christens a warship named after him. They name a mountain after him.
Yeah.
He's a big deal.
Yeah, it goes hard quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's also getting, I think, $1,000 a week, which back in 1957 is like, like $10 million. I don't know what the economy was like that, Ben, but it's a big deal. But so as he gains more and more influence and more power, the folksiness sort of drips away and it's more evident that it's a stage persona, and there's something a little darker going on. One of the things I loved about the film is that they don't delve really into his history or his origin story to tell exactly what's going on in his mind. Does he get consumed by this power that he's attaining? Was that always his goal? Because when we meet him, after he gets out of jail, he's hitchhiking to Florida with his friend Beanie. He doesn't care about anything, but he's very quick to, later on in the film, rub elbows with senators and captains of industry to, eventually potentially get into politics.
Mm-hmm. I'm amazed. Yeah, I mean, luckily that's the creative license of a movie, is to have that meteoric rise happen in a hurry. But no, I think I know they tried to emulate this after like Will Rogers and a couple of the other figures of that era who were quick to put on the right face to win over the public. But yeah, I think what's amazing to me is how, you're right, they were able to keep this movie very enigmatic about that main character. Like what's you hope, I guess you think when you watch the Marcia scenes that that's the real him, the one that's less drunk, the one that's more soft-spoken, the one that kind of slows down and turns the spin off and really talks. But then or is that just the bait and the hook to dangle to get what he's really grasping and trying for? And I think and I think that I know I don't want to fast forward, but I think that final confrontation lets us know. I don't want to say it was an act, but it's been erased by whatever fame and things have corrupted him throughout that whole time, and it follows a great scene before it with Walter Matthau, who's a great presence in this movie in a non-comedic role, talking Marcia and Patricia Neal down from that whole, hey, let me tell you where this is going, where this guy is, and it enables her push to change. And yeah, just the layers of that written for a time then, and even the threats of suicide in the film are edgy stuff for 1957.
Yeah, and this is what I think, among other things, this film is a great example of occasionally, and again, not to disparage anybody, but you'll run into people who are like, I don't like black and white movies. Old movies are so corny. You know, everyone talks like they're in like a 1940s love story. This is a kind of film that I think you could just play today, especially because of the themes that we're sort of talking about, and have it just be thrilling and compelling, and a wonderful role for Patricia Neal, who even though she becomes sort of a compromised character, she folks talk about the need for strong independent female leads in movies. I mean, you can go back 63 years and find a fantastic example of a character who sort of creates this monster, accepts responsibility for it, and then eventually finds the strength with a little bit of nudging from Walter Matthau,
right,
who kind of gets cucked in this whole relationship to walk away. And I had forgotten what the ending of this movie was like. And I think we can jump ahead a little bit, but
sure.
I couldn't remember if Lonesome Rhodes actually killed himself or not, but it was almost worse because he was left alive to almost live out the fate that Matthau had spelled out for him in that wonderful monologue.
That's an awesome monologue. Yeah. Where he's like, you'll come back. Won't be forgotten, but we'll be like, wait, what was that guy? And you'll be a fad, but a fad that doesn't go away. And when I think of people like that, I think of oh gosh, who would be our political fad person? Who still kind of hangs around. I don't want to do dead air on a YouTube channel.
It's all right.
Yeah. But we've had our share of fads, like one's going to escape my mind. Howard Dean, the Democratic chair who was a presidential candidate, and as soon as he was ripping and roaring at some event, gone. John Edwards, a hot young candidate, as soon as he was caught in a marriage scandal, gone. He's probably on some board of directors of some pharmaceutical company somewhere where, he makes his living. He will never be poor, but he'll never be that. He'll never be what the brass ring was.
Well, and it's great that you let off with Howard Dean, because he was sort of a victim of almost the same kind of techno treachery that we see in this film, which, if you haven't seen, we're just going to go full spoilers and talk about this movie because it's important. So if you haven't seen A Face in the Crowd, go out and rent it. Hell, buy it. Criterion put out a disc, I think late last year, earlier this year, that's supposedly
that's the one
really
I watched.
Good. Oh, you got the disc?
Well, from the library. Slow down here.
That still counts.
Yeah.
I rented on Amazon. But at the end of the film, after Marcia has thoroughly been sickened by what she's created with this political scheming monster, she attends a taping of Lonesome Rhodes' new show, The Cracker Barrel, where he's set it up where he's literally sitting in like what looks like a Cracker Barrel restaurant, kind of, the barrels and the shops and, bags of seed and stuff, and a bunch of characters who look like homespun townsy folk that are meant to nod and say, yes, I agree with you, Lonesome. But in a thick, Southern drawl. And as the credits roll, he is looking into the camera and he's kind of mouthing words, kind of like at the end of SNL when you see the whole cast like kind of milling about on the stage, like, what are they saying? I wonder. But there's music.
Or like an Anchorman, you're a dirty pirate whore, stuff like that.
This is the original Dirty Pirate Whore. So she's in the sound booth with the sound engineer, who steps away for a smoke, and she says, I know what he's saying about his audience. He is disparaging them and calling them a bunch of rubes and hicks and easily led, morons. So she goes and she throws the switch to play the live audio. And even though people rush in and they're trying to tear her away from it, it's a wonderful visual, especially in the great black and white of her clutching onto that lever and she's not going to move. And that sinks his career. And the brilliant part is that he has no idea, because he leaves immediately to go to this big senator's ball. And as he takes the elevator down, you can see it's from like the 42nd floor.
Yeah.
The lights are going down, down, down. And you can see the switchboard operators going nuts because people are calling in to complain.
Well, it's just his career sinks with that elevator.
Yes.
You know, and I love, like, in the time of an elevator ride, like you said, that you get those American reactions across this montage of reactions across the country, all these mad and sickened old women who are like, never again. And little kids who are like, I can't believe it. And you said, you're right. The switchboards, the sponsors, everyone's having a tizzy. Then he hits that ground floor with that big smile on his face, like he's going to go do something, and not realizing that he's done. He's cooked. It's a brilliant scene. Because again, the economical filmmaking too, because you do that in an elevator ride.
Right. And how
in a
much
different movie that's post-credit epilogue junk, you know?
Right. But how cheap is it to just film some buttons on elevator lighting up and then set some dramatic music to it and cut it to other stuff? It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Beautiful metaphor, and also, economy is great. Going back to Dave, the following scene where he's in the giant banquet hall and no one has showed up. That reminds me of when Frank Langella lost his bid to even start a campaign because of all the stuff that was brought out by the truth. It's kind
was
of
it the American president? Yeah.
No, that was in Dave.
Well, that's right. It was in Dave. You're right. Right.
Yeah. I've never seen the American president.
Ooh, you need that before November.
Yeah, I might have to squeeze that in.
Yeah. But show or otherwise, go see it. But yeah.
But talk about dead air. I just lost my train of thought.
But he gets that empty room, you know, and it's the help is there, and they're just giggling at him because they've kind of heard, and he just screams at him, and I love watching Griffith lose it in that scene. Yeah,
it's weird because I've watched a number of kind of classic movies, and in this year, because I've had the time, certainly. You mentioned The Help. There's like a quartet of African American like butlers, I guess, dinner servers who are standing around because there's nothing else to do except laugh at this guy who's having a meltdown. But yeah, it is jarring watching stuff in 2020 and just with a real focus on looking at how certain actors were portrayed, and like, wow, this, if there's one trigger warning I can offer for this movie, it's that you're going to see some stuff that is going to kind of make your ears steam. Although I will say, in the opening scene in that jail, there is one guy who's behind bars, and he's a black guy who the sheriff wants to get him to perform, and he says, I got black skin, but I ain't no minstrel, man. I was like, that's such a ballsy and crazy fun delivered line. But I also noticed that I don't know how jails worked, back then, but he was the only guy, I think, behind bars. Everyone else was kind of like this open communal areas,
drinking. Yeah.
Part of me wonders, because it's Arkansas, was that like just a segregationist thing, or is that for his protection?
A bit of both, I have to guess. In 57 Arkansas, sure. Filmed a ton on location, by the way. Way cheaper than filming in LA, they said. So, yeah.
I imagine. And it also it lends it to that feel, because you really feel that transformation from you can feel the tumbleweeds as like Lonesome is getting ready to hitchhike to Florida, and then contrast that with that giant New York City, kind of that oppressive, all the lights and everything, and the madness at the end. It's gorgeous.
Of the films we've done in this series, this is easily my favorite, because it just the ball, like you said, the balls of the writing of this. This is Bud Schulberg, the guy who did from Streetcar Named Desire and stuff like that, and accomplished stage guy, and Elia Kazan's a fantastic filmmaker, and this is they're kind of like, I don't want to say they're maligned one, but this one was dead on arrival in 57. 0 Academy Awards. It's a year where it was Bridge Over the River Kwai and 12 Angry Men. So good luck competing against those two, but I give this movie a ton of credit for having balls, because at the time, Griffith was a stand-up comedian and a barely a theater actor, never really did any movies and things like that. This is Lee Remick's debut. Patricia Neal was coming off of a 4-year hiatus from acting because she was in an affair with Gary Cooper off screen, where she was kind of ostracized.
Jeez, I didn't know that. Wow.
She was the Jennifer Aniston, where you better not act again because Angelina Jolie took your man. Man. So I don't want to say happenstance, but it was you can tell, and some of this is in the more the Criterion edition, but just how very intentional they were to seek out just just different performers, but specific performers. Like Neal, was just a very well trained actress, and even somebody like and Matthau coming in as a very well trained actor, but you got to put that up against that unknown quantity, which is Griffith, and and to think that this is before the Andy Griffith we know, it's just boggling to me. And this is one of those movies where ever since I saw it in 2012, it's one of those movies I recommend to people kind of on the side, because they see it's in a Criterion edition, or they've heard little whispers of it, or we get to an election year like this and movies like this come on lists, and I say, yeah, you got to see that one. The opener is always like, have you seen Andy Griffith? And they're like, yeah, I love him, he's great, he's Common Man, it's so adorable. And then go watch this, and it's just awesome, and I looked at just kind of the acting roundup of that year, and I would have found a place for him in the final 5 for Best Actor. I know Sir Alec Guinness won the whole thing, but come on, look at this guy go.
Yeah, and it's a deft performance because that laugh, that it's off the rails, but it never feels like an act. I feel like I'm watching a guy who could have actually existed in a space and been so obnoxious with that laughter, but also have that good old boy kind of connection to the people he kind of grew up with. That's just the way that they interact with each other and communicated. But it's not a cartoonish performance. It feels very real, and it's walking that fine line, kind of like what we talked about before, of the person he is before he meets Marcia, the person he is with Marcia in private, and the person he becomes when he's on radio or television.
Right.
And then that persona evolves between radio, television, and the national stage and entry into politics. There's so much going on here that, it seems criminal that, he wasn't nominated. Neal, Matthau,
nobody.
Matthau was in it for, it feels like maybe 20 minutes out of the 2 hours, but damn, not only, just outside of that wonderful speech at the end, he is the kind of unrequited love guy, but he's also, working against this force that he sees as corrosive to the culture. But he's also sort of compromised, because there's that lovely scene in the bar at the end where he's talking about he has just finished a book about Lonesome Rhodes that he's getting ready to take to a publisher. And, it's this big truth-telling expose about, what this guy is really doing. But then he says to Marcia, don't worry, I've spared you in ways that you won't spare yourself. So even then, he's covering something up in his own supposedly honest reportage.
Right. It's just, you're right, the layers here, because you have the simplicity of connecting with the common man with just stories and folksiness. And some of this is very Bill Clinton-ish, because you get that man on a porch rocker and he tells a story. We forget that he's a Rhodes Scholar. All we hear is Arkansas twang when Bill Clinton talks. And it doesn't help that, he beds the women he beds and he's turned into the man he is. But it's also, but it's also the Bill Clinton that it plays the saxophone on Arsenio Hall and endears America's hearts. So it's that untapped charisma level too, where you have this connecting to the common man. Then you have step 2 of untapped charisma. And then it's just, what can you do with that? And it becomes just, it's the persuasive angle. It's whether it's snake oil or selling products, or like you said, political aspirations, and, just getting a rise out of people. That persuasion level is so thick and fascinating in this movie, because, as much as this, I guess, has to be listed as satire, I feel like this is something that would have easily been bought and done back in the day then. And we have that even now. Look at I know I was trying to grasp at straws earlier with people, but Howard Stern had a moment where he was as big as this. Rush Limbaugh's had moments where he's as big as this, and none of those guys are running for office because I think they have their skeletons in their closet that won't ever come out. But this is an era before you have skeletons, where you needed a very explicit airing of words to be the skeleton, and the only skeleton it took. I think that's the edge between then and now that is different is, what feels like satire in 1957 of all it took was one unscripted, diatribe, and he's gone in an elevator ride. Whereas today we can watch that stuff every day on Twitter or the 24-hour news cycle, or apologies and PR, and guys have said more and worse and have gotten off less than an elevator ride.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And talking about the parallels to today, we talked a bit about with the elevator ride,
Hmm.
and the switchboard, and the sort of like the proto cancel culture of all those people. Like today, it would just be a tweet storm
It would
of
be a tweet storm. Yeah.
or mobbing and ratioing,
Yeah.
the companies to say, I can't believe what this guy said on the radio or the
It's a
podcast or
Starbucks
whatever.
Christmas cup, right?
Right. There you
Yeah.
go. And then also, earlier on, and this is what makes, I think, Lonesome Rhodes a more complicated character and adds some mystery to his origin, because it's very easy to read. And this sort of ties into why some people, I think, will draw those Trump parallels.
Hmm.
Is he, apparently he'll put on a persona to draw in a large crowd of, kind of uneducated people to, throw their support behind him. And the idea is he just doesn't care about anybody. But
Hmm.
early on in the film, when he first gets onto television, one of his first acts is he brings out this black lady and puts her in front of the camera. And she had recently lost her home
Hmm.
that she shared with her 7 kids to a fire. And I think Matthau even said, and I'm not going to use the exact phrase, but he said, putting a black woman on television that in Arkansas, that's bold.
Hmm.
But he said, this lady lost her house, and she's a good person. She doesn't deserve what happened to her. If everybody watching this could just dig out, like, I think he said 2 bits or 4 bits, I don't know what a bit
Hmm.
currency transfer, let's say it's like 50 cents,
Sure.
because you cut to like wheelbarrows full of coins, and they raised something like $8,000 to build her
Hmm.
a new house. That's proto Kickstarter. That's
Yeah.
Indiegogo,
Yeah.
that kind of a deal. So the parallels, again, you can watch this movie and pick up a lot on, the more, this is the cliche, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But
True.
as with a lot of things we've talked about in Realpolitik, I just wonder if anything's changed. And even though we feel like, oh, this is end of the world stakes,
Hmm.
things might get really bad. But unless someone actually launches a nuclear missile, which how
Right.
often has that happened? We're just going to go through this again in 25 years.
I know. I couldn't. I mean, when I saw it 8 years ago, I thought nothing of it. I saw the media end of it. Now that we have, we have to say it. Now that we have a guy like Trump, a non-professional politician, and a easily a media-born star
Hmm.
in the White House, and he's survived 3 years and change, going on 4. It, I, yeah, you're right. Anything can happen. Anything has happened, and we've had these swings and these dire thoughts of things, or oh my gosh, 4 more years of this, or great 4 more years of that, or we've talked about how you know his ascension has shown and emboldened people that would normally be outspoken in that kind of way, or maybe social media is the new thing pushing the way television and advertising did in 57. But you're right. I mean, I want to hope that this is all cyclical, as if it was, like to match Mathau's speech. I would love for this to be cyclical. Is there? What am I trying to say? If Donald Trump were to lose in a couple of weeks, and he turns into what Mathau says, that he's the Jimmy Carter, the next Jimmy Carter of our presidents, where it's just go Jimmy, go be you. And then it's amazing that Jimmy's done what he's done with his life beyond the presidency, because he was forgotten once
Hmm.
Reagan showed up and things turned another
Yeah,
way.
he was a joke for
Oh
decades.
yeah, yeah. So if that's Trump, let's say Trump loses and that's what he becomes, I wouldn't put it past him just being a surface level celebrity person, going back to beauty pageants and just doing what he does, because that's where the only place his bread is going to get buttered. At the same time, I could easily see a Walter Matthau level speech happen to him, where he just fades into that we don't talk about those 4 years kind of thing, and it just depends on what reform and cycle follows him. If it's more spin of another kind, we're going to point and go, he just brought it out. If it's completely wholesale and different, yeah, he's an embarrassing blip in the road. But that's the interesting thing we're in. And yeah, I love the open ending of this movie, because you're right. Like, will Mathau's speech come true, or is that guy going to jump off that roof? You don't know. And it's kind of, I don't want to say scary, but it's just, I'll go back to that boulder. It's just boulder, because like it could really go either way. And that's the fun part of it.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think I'd completely finished my thought when it came to that
Yeah.
lady, because and it circles back to what you're saying.
Okay.
Um, a few scenes later, or maybe it's like 40 minutes later, he's doing a telethon. It's during that montage where he's christening stuff, I think. He does a montage for, it's like the Crippled Children's Fund or something like that, something very non-PC. But I think if this were more in line with a Trump-esque type of character where it's all a con, you would have seen him taking those wheelbarrows full of quarters and pocketing them for himself. You would have seen him, going backstage of that telethon, like, so how much have we raised? Okay, we'll give $20 to the kids. And I'm going to take the rest of this.
Yeah.
You get the feeling that deep down somewhere, he really does want to help people. Maybe it's that he wants to use those rich power structures, which he at the same time hates. He hates politicians, he hates big business because he thinks they're all a bunch of elitist jerks. He wants to use their power so that he can elevate himself in a way to speak more to the kinds of people that he wants to help. Now, how altruistic is that? I can't say because we don't get too much into it. But again, it's that ambiguity because nobody is that clean cut. Even people that are occupying the White House today. And that's, I think, one of the helpful messages of this film is you can't believe anything you see on TV or the radio or what people write about you.
Yeah, I agree. If there's a telling lesson as the life lesson guy, it is. You can't. Everything you see on television, and some of this is unscripted programming. Like we've had a groundswell in the last 20 years of reality TV. I think ever since Survivor hit it big in the year 2000, we've seen every channel in the world, including channels that aren't meant to be reality TV channels, like the History Channel and MTV.
And just TLC, the Learning Channel.
Yeah, we don't learn a damn thing anymore. It's become a zillion expressions of these slice of life, silly ass reality TV shows, which when you see how they're done are as scripted as the next thing they are. They just happen to involve unprofessional people. And to see all of that, because that's Lonesome Rhodes too. He's your early stages of unscripted television. And to see what it's become today makes me not bat an eye at could something like this rise or could something like this change? Because even today, like a guy who, sings songs on the radio and beds a baton twirler and has great concerts and stuff would probably get a very low level TLC show today if he tried, compared to what other we have Real House. I mean, every scandalous version of human we have on a show and we embrace it and eat it up like ice cream. So it's almost safe when we go back to 57 compared to now, which is scary.
It really is. The baton twirler thing I want to talk about.
Please do.
Because there's another weird Trump parallel with the whole judging the pageants and stuff. But we haven't talked about the Joey De Palma character.
Okay.
He's kind of this slick climber who's the anti-folksy ambitious guy who partners up with Lonesome Rhodes and gets him all of these deals and kind of like greases the skids for his rise to fame. I don't know if I use that metaphor correctly, but he goes with Lonesome back to his hometown in Arkansas to judge a high school not majorette. I was going to say marionette. That's not right. But all these like young high school girls twirling and doing their thing on the football field, and Lee Remick playing a 17-year-old girl. And they actually mentioned, because they're kind of like staring, passing secret looks to each other, Lonesome and this girl.
That in a second here too.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't wait to get some inside scoop there.
Okay.
But at one point, it might have been Joey or somebody else saying, that girl's 17 years old. I don't know how old Lonesome's supposed to be. He's like probably in his 30s, right?
Gotta be. Come on.
Yeah, but either way, it's nasty. And it's even nastier when, again, I'm not sure of the age of consent, but a few scenes later, it's a big reveal that, hey, they got married.
Yeah, it's a part of the show. Like, oh, wow, look at her come on stage. We have puppies from Mexico. It's the most adorable, accepted American thing when it's shady as can be. So, oh yeah.
And just to put a cherry on top of that, later it turns out that Joey is having an affair with Betty Lou, the 17-year-old high school graduate. Maybe she turned 18 in the time, but like you've got a movie where these two guys are like swapping a 17-year-old. I don't know what the hell's going on.
The best comp I've seen since then for that character is like Jason Alexander's character in Pretty Woman, where it's like Richard Gere's little number one lawyer handler who thinks he can kind of have some of the same fun that Richard Gere does, and it backfires terribly.
So what's the Lee Remick story?
So the those glances you see, the only Elia Kazan said you got to kind of nail the scene because Andy Griffith is not the most traditional actor, and his only point of direction. And Griffith said this in the behind the scenes documentary. And to see an 80-something-year-old Griffith with his gorgeous white hair and lovely face, repeat these words was great. He goes, Elia, I can't do the accent, but anyway, he said Elia came to me and said, just look at her, and he's like, look at her. And he's like, the only point of direction I'm going to give you is fuck her. And he's like, he just goes, fuck her. And Andy's like,
God.
and Andy knew that just do that with your eyes. And when you see those, just the squint and the glare and the look, and then the glower back and forth, he's doing just that, Oh man, but that's all it took.
And that he did not tell Lee Remick that that's the direction that he gave, because that would have been a totally different reaction shot on her part.
Yeah, definitely. But it's working for him.
And I had to look, because she looked, she plays the part of a 17-year-old like high school majorette very well. Mm-hmm. And especially later when they come out as being married and they do a TV special about it, and she's like twirling the baton and he's doing this ultra sexist thing of like, here's the first reason I married her. And she like takes off her top to reveal like this skimpy bra, and then all this. I was surprised that they did like I don't want to call them panties, but whatever she was doing, like she was showing more than I thought you could even get on screen in 1957.
Cheek. There's some cheek there.
Yeah, but I had to look up Lee Remick's age just to make sure my stomach didn't turn, because I think she was like 22 or
21, 22 tops. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, at least she wasn't, because she looked like she could have been a teenager.
Easily. Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's really creepy. Mm-hmm. That bit of direction that I guess it
whatever
worked,
works.
It was flawless. But yeah, again, talk about wonderful filmmaking. The look on Patricia Neal's face when she's making her way through the crowd, because she thinks that Lonesome had to go to Mexico to get his divorce from his previous wife, who we'll talk about in a second, officially, had that officially decreed. He came back from Juarez because he got married to this 17-year-old girl when he had already proposed. Was this before he proposed to her or after?
Got to be after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because he had called her in kind of like this drunken, like depressed stupor to come over and propose to her minutes after he had slept with someone else. Real stand-up guy. But no, that look when she's making her way through the crowd to the plane, because she thinks she's about to welcome home her man, they're going to get married, and he steps out with his new bride, and there's TV reporters everywhere and just cameras all over the place.
The background is screaming women, and she's gone.
Yeah, and this is the other thing about this is all those shots of screaming women and teenagers. This is, almost a decade before Beatlemania.
Easily.
This is like Elvis territory, and I hadn't even really considered that, but he captured this. This could have been like a rock concert documentary in some parts.
Oh, definitely. And I want to see 57. This would be right when Elvis was starting to hit, so I'm sure they can borrow some of that on a level there. Yeah. Amazing.
But
and then shot in a way. I love the black and white because like you get those noirish shadows. People come in and out of shadow in different places. That bar scene that we talk about where Matthau is kind of, giving Patricia Neal just kind of the honest truth there. That scene's great with the black and white and all that. And oh man, and then even the shadows were at the end, that big climactic yelling, shouting scene, and the crowd noise from Beanie and stuff like that. Just the way. Even Griffith walking on his little catwalks and it just gets shaded and lit in a different way. Despite this massively bright room, they still find a shadow for him to kind of stand in and screw up in and yell in. And it's so good.
Yeah, I do want to go back to his ex-wife who shows up, the original Mrs. Rhodes, who busts her way into the penthouse to talk to Marcia and kind of give her the full details. Like, this guy isn't who he seems to be. What I love is when she makes her entrance and Beanie lets her in, she's kind of like this golly aw shucks, down home Arkansan. But the moment he leaves, her accent, it almost like gradually slips, like she's turning down a volume to the point where she gets to this almost like a New York huckster kind of an accent. And at one point, I had to go back and listen to this with the volume up because I couldn't tell if I heard this correctly. Did she say that at one point Lonesome broke her jaw?
Maybe. I don't remember it to that level, but I wouldn't put it past it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that, to me, that sort of colored the rest of the the rest of the movie, I'm like, okay, because I hadn't seen it in decades,
Mm-hmm.
but even if he didn't do anything, there is still that menace there. Like, oh my God, if they do end up together, what's waiting for her back home?
Yeah, man. Whew. No, it just like you said, the enigma is there. Like you see him put some care into Marcia and then not. You see him be happy to bed the young woman, but then maybe have a passer, beats a few girls up. Obviously speaks his mind with his words. But no, just the dialogue is what impresses me because you're talking about little lines and moments like that, and then you have we talked about Mathau's two good moments, but even just the screening room with the senator presidential candidate and how it turns from, well, I don't know about my opinion, that to taking over the room, and he just arises, comes out, a couple of cigarette drags, a couple of drinks, and all of a sudden every idea in the world spins out and it just every single one of them nail and land to that room, and it turns. That I think that for me that was more turning point of the movie in terms of the escalation of what that guy could be than just anything that was on camera, is when you get him off camera and the way he can manipulate and take his power of persuasion further than just what the camera can do. Like, I think that was the moment where he's like, all right, me talking to a camera is one thing, and I know I can get people in easy, but if I can influence the most powerful people, now I've got something, I can go somewhere. And that was the cool turn for me.
And there's even another twist to it, which is very subtle, but when we get it like in the last probably 10 minutes, as much as, and this is where I think the Trump parallels kind of fall apart, especially because he's the president and ostensibly he's, at least he's in the office of the most powerful person in the world, kind of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Lonesome Rhodes, for as much power and fame as he accrues and as much money, he is still at the whim of corporations and
Very much so.
politicians and people that can and do pull the plug when the tide turns.
That is different than the Trump we have now. Like, he has bought his way to a place of, I don't want to say being bulletproof, but he's fine,
Right. And it's not clear immediately that he's answering to people, that he can be, canceled within his own administration. But we get a lot of corporate boardroom and meeting scenes in this film, which I'd completely forgotten. There's the whole Vitajex storyline, which I think is great. There's this company that is trying to make this, pep pill. There's so much pill popping in this movie. Everyone's like,
oh yeah,
got the little pill bottles and like,
yeah,
like Pez. But with Vitajex, they get Lonesome Rhodes to come in and be the spokesperson. He kind of like starts like changing the entire campaign. Like, let's make him yellow because that's the color of the sun. It'll get people to get up and go. And he's hawking all these weird products. But with this whole corporate angle, you really get a sense of there's the general, who's I guess is sort of the colonel character, if we're talking about a parallel to Elvis, who's kind of managing him and helping him help out all of their rich buddies. What I liked is they're pretty much one-dimensional characters, but the person who I think owned the Vitajex account, or one of the big accounts that Lonesome Rhodes was working on, towards the end of the film, he comes to Lonesome backstage and says, yeah, your buddy Joey DePalma is angling to take this account away. And I don't know if you know how it works in my business, but if you lose a major account, you're done. I've got a kid at Princeton. The guy has a damn heart attack right in front of him. And Lonesome's like, that's not really my problem.
Yeah, show must go on. Poof.
Yeah, but even that one scene with that guy, you can tell that mask of the corporate, that kind of filter is slipping away, and you see the person inside who everything is hanging on this one big account. And you just feel bad for him. He's been in a few scenes leading up to this, and you're like, I don't care about this dude. But then once you see it's like the homespun, down-home version of the people that Lonesome thought he was helping. It's just he's in New York City instead of backwoods Arkansas.
Right, and you're right. I think that's an angle that doesn't match today. Like, we don't have that. We have, if, like you said, if Trump had done enough wrong, his own party hasn't eaten him up yet, and so either business is good, which it clearly is for many of them, or there's so many of them. And that's kind of been the thing that people have said about Trump over these 4 years is, how many people have come forward to represent a bit of what he likes to represent, or his base. Let's just say it like that. His base has grown so much that it doesn't matter. And that's where it gets scary, even if this was a liberal candidate instead of a conservative candidate. Like, when a base gets so big that and errors and flaws don't matter. That's where it gets scary, which is why this movie is softer than the president, because again, in the course of an elevator ride, gooses are cooked.
Well, yeah, and that's, again, that's where the parallel sort of breaks,
Yeah.
because the image of the American person or the American citizen is so pure in this film that if they find out
Mhm.
they've been lied to, I mean, one of the reasons they're able to sever Lonesome's contract is because of a morals clause.
Right. We're both laughing. That's how you know, like, come on.
Right.
Yeah.
But today, I mean, that's part of the thing that frustrates a lot of people about Donald
Mhm.
Trump is a lot of the people that vote for him acknowledge, yeah, I don't like the guy. I think he's kind of a scumbag, but he's,
Mhm.
on my side, or he's fighting for things that I
Yeah.
believe
I
in.
like the way he speaks his mind,
Right.
Yeah, like morals would be the opposite thing they like. They would
Yeah.
qualify with him. Yeah.
For every bit of conjecture down to the Access Hollywood tape where he's on, tape saying
Mhm.
some, not so flattering things,
Yeah.
and people are like, that's still my guy.
Yeah.
That's that.
Oh, boys being boys. Every excuse in the world laid at his feet. Yeah.
Right. And so you don't have that in 57.
No,
When did we go astray?
I don't know. That's a great question between then and now. Yeah.
But yeah, so it is a fascinating piece to watch, and as much as we do see parallels today, I think it's a very hopeful movie, because the
I
bad
agree.
guy does get his comeuppance in the end, even if there's an idea that he could come back in some form or another. And maybe Matthau's character was wrong.
Mhm.
Perhaps he would be able to reinvent himself and come
Yeah.
back, and even be bigger. He could do the Jimmy Swaggart, a tearful apology kind of thing, and send me more money, I've sinned.
Yeah. They said some of this was pulled from somebody like Billy Graham, who's had his peaks and valleys of audience, of scope and reach. That's a fair parallel there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Have we had a person since 57, would you say, that collapsed and returned? Like, who's a guy? I don't want to say guy because maybe a woman's done it too, but like, have we had somebody who's fallen from grace so bad and they've come up? Is it just somebody like Carter who had a joke of a presidency, but is the Habitat for Humanity, sage?
not on that scale. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking mostly in terms of like the politics to media turnstile, where you've
Hmm.
got, like, I'm thinking Oliver North, who after Iran
Yeah.
Contra, everyone thought, well, that guy is going to be, just a laughing stock or put under the jail, that kind of thing. He ended up with I don't know what he's doing now, but he had a show on, like, I think Fox News or something like
Hmm.
that. That kind of thing. If you want to look at just pop culture, in the advent of Me Too, you had like Louis C.K., who was
Yeah.
destroyed for about 2 years. And then, I mean, he's nowhere near what he was, but he's still
No.
able to come back and perform rooms. This
Right.
kind of gets in, again, this is proto cancel culture
This is
in a
true.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder. Yeah. I keep thinking of, because I don't immediately go to Trump with this. So the parallels are fun to examine and fun to try on. So,
Well,
yeah.
hey, actually, let's look at James Gunn. He was fired off of
Wishful tweets. Yeah.
Guardians 3 for some tweets, and
Hmm.
now he's like, everyone's losing their mind over The Suicide Squad, which is coming out
Yeah.
next year. So he can't, because people are like, I understand it was sort of like that game of Battleship with him and Roseanne and all this other stuff,
Sure.
but she is to this point not made a comeback. I don't know how much of that is
Hmm.
just inability to, or a lack of desire to re-enter the fray after what happened
Right.
with their TV show. But James Gunn has certainly turned that into an opportunity to, I kind of repent, but also like just let the smoke die down, and we'll see what his career does after this movie comes out.
Yeah. I guess the other one's about Hugh Grant did a mea culpa on Leno, and he's fine.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. did enough drugs to kill an army. He's fine, making zillions of dollars. So yeah, it happens. But you're right. I don't know if we've seen it on that level.
In
Like
the
because
political
now
realm, yeah.
we're talking presidents at this point, and I guess the closest would be Clinton. Like Clinton had his pretty good scandal, but now we look back and go, "Gosh, if that's as bad as it ever got, look at that guy. He's not so bad. His wife
Well,
turned out great, and
well,
or at least to a degree."
yeah. Well, Clinton is an interesting case because, there was that scandal, with Lewinsky,
Hmm.
but and that did blow over. But then when Me Too popped off, people were
Hmm.
examining, well, Bill Clinton is no longer really anywhere near the top of those greatest presidents lists, which he kind of was up until, sort of Obama.
Yeah.
But now it's kind of like, well, we're just not going to talk about Bill Clinton
No,
because
like
of
let's.
those indiscretions or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's an odd case, but he's still kicking around. He's not like exiled or anything.
No, no, they still let him talk at conventions and speak in different things and be a president and hang out with. I love how much he hangs out with George Bush. Like those two are like in cahoots together, and it's hilarious. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
what's the you said this is the penultimate episode. What's the last one next month?
I don't want to jinx it because I
Ooh.
haven't actually I haven't actually set it up yet, and
Say no more.
the guest I have, I still have to pitch it, but we kind of talked
Hmm.
about it earlier this year, so I have to kind of remind them, like,
Right, right, right.
do it. Yeah. So it should be good. It should be ultra timely because if the timing
Hmm.
works out, it will come out the night before Election Day.
Ooh, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, this was good, sir.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you going on this journey with me and talking about this film in particular. I think is a great way to kind of
Oh yeah,
wind down this crazy election year.
yeah. Because in the different movies we've watched so far, we haven't seen that much media. Like election is very cloistered to just that small community,
The school,
and
yeah.
yeah, and oh god, what was the first one we watched?
All the President's Men.
Well, I guess that's huge media, but like that's more on the factual level. This is definitely on the satirical level. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess we all did see Irresistible at the same time too. So that's like a subtweet of this thread called Reelpolitik. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, I totally forgot about Irresistible. God.
Oh, right,
Um,
rightfully so.
yeah, I think it was okay.
We both liked it. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I guess yeah, another month and some change till the big event. So
Hmm.
I hope you've
Get
got
your
your
mail-in ballots ready, right?
I was going to say get your emergency food and water and have your escape route mapped out.
Couldn't, right? Yeah. That bunker can fit right there in the basement.
I'm reminded of the Alien versus Predator tagline: "Whoever wins, we lose."
Oh gosh, it does feel like that from day to day as this gets closer, and it's just going to get worse. The spin and all that. So, oh,
Yeah. All right. Well, stay strong, and we'll talk again. Probably not about a political movie, but about a movie, and I look
you
forward
bet.
to it.
All right,
All right,
thank
man.
you,
Take
Ian.
care. Thank you. Bye.